Hey, this is Kyle with KyleCGraves.com. Today we're talking about credit card usage and how it affects your credit score. So let's back up for a second. Credit scores can be so mysterious because what goes into building up your credit score sometimes can feel really hidden, and we can be actively working on our credit, but it feels like it's getting nowhere because we don't know what's going on. So one of the biggest things that impacts your credit score is your credit usage, or what's called your credit utilization. Basically, this is how much credit are you using compared to how much of a limit do you have. So does your credit card have a $5,000 limit? If so, how much of that are you using? The more credit you use, the actually more it lowers your score. What credit card companies want to see and what builds your credit score to be higher is if you have what's called a lower utilization, meaning you don't use as much credit as is available to you. So this actually impacts your score by 30%. So your credit utilization has a 30% influence on your credit score. This is the second most important thing in building your credit. The most important is your payment history, making sure you're paying on time. But the second most is having 30%, the credit utilization being lower. Okay, so let's run through an example here. So let's say that you have a credit card, all right? And we're going to use this chart here. And let's say that this is a credit card. Okay, now let's say your credit card has a limit of $1,000. All right, so down here at the bottom is 0. Okay, now let's say you've been spending your credit card over the past few years, and let's say it's actually got up to about $7,500. All right, so you currently are using $7,500 out of the, or not 700, 7,500. Let's do 750. There we go, that's better math. You're using $750 out of the $1,000 that you're allowed to use. Now, to a credit card company, you're using a pretty high percentage of debt. To them, they see this as a bad thing. They see this as risky. This means you have less available to you, and you're using more debt than you're getting close to the limit that you've been approved for. And so what ends up happening is anything above 30% usage actually starts to harm your credit score. So what we want to do to bring the credit score up higher is we want to get that usage down to below 30%. So let's say you start working on paying this off and you get this down to below 30%. All right, so if you get that below 30%, your credit score is going to start increasing because 30% is one of the statistical markers that's going to help increase your credit score if you get your usage below that. All right, now let's say you continue to pay off this credit card debt, and now we're at 10% and below. Now that's going to start increasing your credit score even more. So they kind of work sequentially. So when you're above 30%, your credit score is going to drop down a little bit. When you're below 30%, it's going to start to increase a little bit. When you drop below 10%, it's going to increase even more. So what you want to do when you're managing your credit card is get this debt as low as possible without getting to zero. So you want to keep a little bit on your credit report, but you want to get that below 10%. That way your credit score benefits. And what this shows the creditors is that you have a lot of credit available to you, but you don't have to use it. This is their indicator for how you're using debt effectively. So now the question is, what's the best way to manage your credit card using moving forward and making sure you use your utilization correctly? So what we want to do is make sure that your credit card has one use. Okay, if you're really good at budgeting, you might be able to take a credit card and have multiple uses out of it, but we want it to be one use here. Okay, so what you might do is you might take this card and you might say this card is only for gas. So I'm going to use this to pay for my gas, and then I'm going to pay that off every month except for a few dollars. Okay, so you want to pay off your credit card regularly. That way you don't collect interest every single month, but you don't want to bring that all the way down to zero. And the reason why is because your credit card is only going to report once a month. Now, when it reports, we don't want it to report zero because then it's going to seem like there's nothing on your credit card and that your credit card is not being used. We want to make sure there's a few dollars on there so that it's being reported that you are using credit. Okay. And then also you want to make sure that what you're spending on your credit card fits in your budget. Treat it like cash. If you're going to go spend $30 on gas, make sure that you have $30 in cash available. And use a software, something like You Need a Budget is what I use to make sure that I'm treating all my credit cards like cash. So I'm never using it as extra money. I'm using it just like money in the bank account. So as soon as I spend that money on my credit card, I have that money earmarked for when that statement comes due. I'm going to pay it off immediately. That way I always have the money there. It's never a surprise. And then I'm able to track what's in my bank account and what's on the credit card at the same time. So just to recap, keep your credit card balances, your utilization below 30% if you can, and then continue to work to pay that down to get below 10% to help build your score up. If you have any questions, let me know. Thanks so much for watching this video.